I don't see anything particularly wrong with Section 5. It simply indicates that we should study the potential, and I think that's a given, frankly, that that should be any element in a deer management world, that we should look at how supplements may, in fact, help. In fact, I think even someone mentioned about there could be a heritage project to attempt to see what different combinations of supplements might do to help.
Especially with distribution, that was a very interesting discussion. That was what some of the biologists were talking about. They could possibly help to further distribute deer. Yeah.
Section 9, I believe that is okay. I think that particularly with 11, we need to probably strike that language that low in relation to historical highs, because, or use some other standard with respect to the intensive predation control.
Population goals?
I think that it's fine.
Production, population goals. I mean,
We don't have it.
yeah, that's why we couldn't find wording like that, because they don't currently exist. But
Well, but-
if they existed,
But you do go back to here, indicate production control. Production is one of the.
so suggestion would be population goals. Is
Production goals.
Production goals.
Is the term we use in number 1.
Yes.
That's what you need.
game production goals.
I also think, I understand, and I can appreciate the idea that it should be, any of these should be done on predation control, should be done in coordination with wildlife services. They're the ones that, the department doesn't do any predation control. We identify, the commission and the department identify predation problem areas, and then we work with the wildlife services to provide the actual predation control. And so I think that's very important. But I also question whether or not you want to tie yourself to a specific period, like the 5 years continual growth area there. You may decide that it should be, the populations were so low that you need more than the 5-year period to get back to an acceptable.
And now when we're talking about the stuff at the committee, that was what the shall consider. You should think about it. At that point, it should really be a point of discussion. And a lot of that came out of the gentleman from Texas that came and gave us a presentation. That was kind of his thing too. Give it a shot. Bodenchuck, yeah. Okay. Give it a shot. Push it for at least 5, and then, at the very least, reconsider. Not necessarily kill it, but, and so I don't know if there's better wording in there. Could you have? Then shall consider reduction. Because that was one of those things that Then I think Mr. Lent brought up is we don't want to go on forever.
No, and I
So
understand
is there something? If there's better verbiage, we're wide open.
I think you could actually just delete
I think you'd
that
just take out the 5 years, sort of thing. And
Where
leave it as
population has seen
has
long
continual growth and decreasing predator populations over
strike 2 words.
over a
5
period
years.
of time. As that leaves a guideline without putting an end number on the thing.
Um,
The last thing I would indicate to you is on,
okay.
or actually on 12. I didn't hear anybody else mention this one here. It's the last sentence. And or is within 20% of all-time historical numbers. Again, that has some concerns for me unless we know exactly what the numbers were for every unit, every deer unit that we have. And so I don't know whether the 20%.
Population goals. So I mean, that was kind of the thing. Is there's got to be some form of a guideline, and everything talks about. And some people are saying, but you look through the WAFWA stuff. Everything's talking about energetic stress. Everything stresses an animal. All animals.
How about going to the terms used before, and that's production goals?
Production goals.
That's what you need.
Goals. And and they came up with, you have to do something to reduce that energetic stress when if you want your populations to grow.
The last comment I have on section 13, I think that's another one where you should change shall to should.
And the one thing there was it was appropriate control practices. I mean, appropriate is that was the wishy-washy word.
So it should in many cases, but it also, I think, focuses the fact that that's what we should do. I will say this, what the process is that this is the first reading. The second reading takes place tomorrow. And when is action going to be taken?
Saturday. Probably would have been June, but that meeting no longer exists. So
and I guess that was my thing, is that if we had had the June meeting to work with, I would agree it should be sent out to the cabs once we have made, because you've made some changes here, or there have been some suggested changes that I think should be reviewed. I also think that what you might want to consider is an ongoing study group, somewhat along the lines that was suggested by Tina Nappy, as a matter of fact, whereby you involve much of where we hunt is BLM land or Forest Service land. There are other people that you may want to, over a period of time, on a continuing basis, to review this policy, that you might want to involve more people and agencies. That's just my take on what I see as there.
all right, and I'll throw out a couple things that came up at the committee. So the only one there was, we kept trying to involve them in the process of developing information, and basically what seemed to come up with is they'd be happy to be involved in criticizing what you come up with, but they don't want to get involved. They could come and tell you what their policies are, but they don't want to come and tell you what you should be doing. There's a lot of that, you got to talk to my boss thing seems to be going on. They tell you all kinds of things, but not on the record. Go ahead.
Sharon, I want to thank you for at least getting, refining a policy together. It's a long, tedious job, and when I first set up the committee, I asked all the cabs to see what they had, and I don't think we've gotten much input from the cabs on this, so we as a commission had to go ahead and do it. You had to do it particularly with your committee, and it's a very, very tough assignment, and you did a good job, I think. And basically, the concept that I had, and I've talked to a lot of other states, each area biologist is responsible for his area. And I know biologists in other states, they've been fired if they didn't do what they're supposed to do. And they don't get overridden by the regional biologist, or the head guy, or the director. And they're responsible for an area. And they take it, and if they're really responsible, if it's set up that way, they're really, really responsible, and they have the ultimate authority for that area, then they have to do population estimates of the deer in their area. And if he sets up a goal for his area, and once he has a goal, then he monitors them. If the population is not there, and this is what a policy is all about in a sort of in a long form, and if the population is not there, he doesn't meet his goal, just like any businessman. If you don't meet your sales goal, then either they fire you or you find another job. And that should happen to the biologist. If he can't meet his goal, he should find out what's wrong. And if he does find what's wrong, then he takes appropriate action, whether it's predators or what if fires or snowstorms, whatever it is. But he gives a good assessment of what's wrong in his area. And if he can't do it, then he has X number of days, because we as a commissioner are the only one that can close the season down or change the season. And he has X number of days to come to the commission and say, hey, I don't know what's happening. And then the commission should take action. They should, do an intensive predator management in the area like Utah does. And the director in one area in Utah just gave $100,000 for intensive predator control in 3 areas to keep the trophy up, the trophy hunting in that area. And if that doesn't do it, then you got to start looking at shutting the tags down, shutting the seeds down. You look at the non-residents, take the non-residents out. Then you start cutting the residents down, and then you shut the seeds down, because if you can't find a reason why the population is decreasing in an area, then you got to take some action to save the resource. And that's essentially, in a nutshell, how some of the other states do it. It works really good. So this is a policy that tries to do that, and it's expanded a little bit, but it's a big job to do it, and I commend the chairman for doing it.
Thank you very much.
Mr.
I
Chairman,
think we've had almost, yes, go ahead.
I think everybody's agreed so far. I've been hearing that 200,000 is an unrealistic goal, to set a population goal.
Well,
200,000 is
They need
unrealistic.
to be unit by unit, area by area, yeah. I mean, it's,
Well, at the statewide, that's an unrealistic goal. Don't we need to have some number, though?
that's what the department needs to develop. And that's what this set to me says. Number 1, shall actively pursue enhancing game populations by setting and reaching big game production goals. There you go. Under this policy, we don't need to come up with today or anytime this month what those goals are. The department really needs to come up with unit this is a reasonable goal. Unit this is a really reasonable
We're
goal.
gonna do it by unit or area? Unit's a little tough.
Don't want to get too specific in a broad policy.
Well, I understand that.
That's the next step.
That's why area would make more sense, it would seem to me.
I guess we could specify it, but it'd depend on a lot of bloody things. This is. I couldn't figure out how to get any tighter than that. Without.
We're gonna hear it again tomorrow,
We're here again tomorrow. We've talked about it a lot, and we
With
really
the
need to move on.
with the changes
Yep.
already
We'll
agreed
come
on.
up with those. Yeah.
Can I chime in?
All right. We gotta. But yeah, go ahead. But we gotta get moving.
First of all, what we're really hearing is and what I think everybody knows, the mule deer problem is bigger than it's the BLM, it's landowners, it's, we're talking about fires, there's some data in the forestry. So ultimately, I think we have to do something like the Safe Grass do, where we get everybody on board.
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, we still do need a policy. We've heard of a lot of changes, and I'd like to just make a couple quick comments on. Number 1, I think we should leave the first sentence and the last sentence, and for the time being, get rid of all of this stuff about personnel. I don't think it's our purview as a commission. But I think if we did that, if we have the meat of what we want to do, it's just that we're not going to do something that controversial and that restrictive at this point in time. Basically, number 2 is reasonable. There could be some changes in there, but I think it's basically okay. Number 3, we talked about, I think, changing probably throughout this document, production goals, using production goals instead of the historical high language. And with respect to that, in number 3, the last sentence of the first paragraph could be eliminated. We're going to do that on a case-by-case basis as we go along.
Number 3, which portion now?
The last sentence of the first paragraph.
There's an option.
First sentence of the next paragraph. I mean, doe harvests, the department's gonna come to this commission every time there's a doe harvest, and it's gonna have to be ruled upon at that point in time, so I don't think it needs to be there. These are my suggestions. We talked about changing shall to should in number 4. I'm not sure where we're at on number 8 where it says end out. I think the last word was that should be changed to commission. I'll just remind us of that.
Okay.
Number 10, shall to should. Number 11, I struck the word in the first sentence, I struck intensive. And then again, changed the language to on the historical highs on that section. I had some issues with the last sentence on the page on number 11, but Commissioner Picoro kind of cleared that up a bit, so I'll refer on that so I can read the new language. Number 12, I think I'm not willing at this point to put into policy the 60 days and the 20% and those kinds of things. It's way too restrictive. We have the option to hear that on a case-by-case basis when the department brings recommendations to us. So I think really only the first sentence is all I can support in number 12. Number 13, change shall to should, and that's as much as I can comprehend at the moment.
All right. We need to be moving right along. We'll hear this again tomorrow. Everybody get a chance to digest it. We'll hash it over, hopefully.
Are we going to have some of the suggestions, like, is this going to be like retyped with some of the things we know we're kind of have agreement on? Or?
I don't know what staff will be able to do. Because there's so many different suggestions. That's the worst thing about it. We'll just have to kind of hash it over tomorrow, I guess.
Plus you have a second reading tonight.
Yeah, second reading tomorrow. Yeah. And then maybe we can hash over them a little more, because, I mean, what are you going to do right now? There's strike the entire thing, there's strike huge sections, there's 2 more hours on it. There's item number 9. And item number 9 is report and recommendations, Feral Horse Committee. And that'll be followed, and you could basically probably meld that in with item 10, which is the policy. Mr. Stremler.
Scott?
You're on board, yes.
Point of order on this. I was told, I believe it was at the February meeting, that I could get involved with this committee. And I was, at the time, it was specifically with regard to the water rights. And you encouraged me to get involved with that committee on some of these issues. And so I've waited, and it's my recollection, unless I just flat missed it, maybe I was really busy, but has there been any additional committee meetings?
They ran out of money to do anything.
Okay, my point is that if there's been no meetings, this agenda item says, report and recommendations from Feral Horse Committee. And, Commission will hear a report from the Feral Horse Committee. If there's been no meetings since the last time that we heard from Mr. Stremler as chairman of the committee,
Maybe we should
then
hear what he has to say.
how can we do this? Is this?
All right.
He's not reporting for the committee, he's reporting for himself. It's improperly agendized, I'm gonna have to.
Well, What do we
Have
have?
I been-
What do we
have I-
have to say on number 9? I mean, basically we're here to talk about the policy is the main thing, but
Have I been here since the last committee meeting? Because I don't think I've been to a meeting since this meeting.
I don't think we had that.
Since
There
we
was,
had a committee meeting in Eureka.
We had.
And I invited everybody. I told the NDOW staff, I think it was Elmer Bull, to put it out to all the RAC people, everybody. So it was agendized right, because we'd been in violation of open meeting law before. And we just had a real no-show. There was some horse advocates that showed up to the Reno office here. But
When was that meeting?
Floyd presented. Floyd was here. He was not.
Mike, when was your meeting?
geez, I don't have my calendar in front of me, but it was all agendized, right? It was in Eureka.
But on what's happened at past meetings is all we need to talk about under 9. As long as we speak about what happened at those meetings and what came out of those meetings. 'Cause I know Floyd talked about that some before, but he didn't have all the information.
Right. What at the last meeting in Eureka, what we had decided was we were not going to write a letter to the state engineer, because that was one of the things that we had talked about, because that's kind of being taken care of in the assembly right now. It's passed the assembly that horses do not have a water right, and it's going to the Senate. They were, just to give some background, they were getting water rights under wildlife. So anyways, that's kind of taken care of itself, so we don't have a letter for the state engineer on the water rights. On the policy, we had wrote a policy, and it was so convoluted, we'd cut it a piece. It was too long, and then we cut it down, and then it got kind of misprinted, and then Floyd was here, and it ended up being kind of a rolling wreck, so I decided to write it myself. So we did not have a committee meeting. I wrote the policy myself. I'm a somewhat of an expert on the wild horse issues. I've read every case law on wild horses that's gone to court. And what this policy is reflective of the act itself. And it just gives some triggers for NDOW or the commissioners, however you want to put it, to get involved, because I think what it's building up to with the new policy that the BLM has got, and I don't know who has my Code of Federal there it is. If I could grab that real quick.
Yeah, take it, because
You want it?
no.
Have any of the commissioners read the new proposed strategy put out by Bob Abbey? Hank has. Anybody else?
Heard about it, but haven't read it.
Okay, I just printed off a couple pages, but on page 29, it says, under the proposed strategy, the BLM would temporarily hold the numbers of wild horses and burros in the 10 western states at 32,000 to 36,000 animals, about 54 to 9,400 higher than the established AML of 26.6. This population level cannot be sustained over the long term without amending the BLM's RMPs to rebalance the mix of multiple uses, e.g. reducing livestock grazing or wildlife numbers. That should be a trigger to you guys that this is their proposed strategy. This has already been out to comment. I don't think you guys made comments on it. So anyways, I got several pages here printed off that are pretty controversial to what the actual act of Congress is. And then earlier in my public comments, I said CFR 1610.3-2, it's consistency requirements, and I had Brian Stockton look at this earlier. And anyways, if you guys have a officially adopted policy, according to FLPMA, which is the Federal Land Policy Management Act, and under the Code of Federal Regulations reflecting back to FLPMA, it says that if you have an officially adopted policy, that they are obligated to coordinate with you. And if your policy is consistent with federal law, then they are to take your policy or plan and use it. So, like, I'm the chairman of Pershing County Natural Resource Committee, and we have an officially adopted land use plan, and we have a thing with wild horses there, grazing, wildlife, all that stuff. And now we're coordinating. Black's Law Dictionary definition of coordination is equal status and equal rank. So it isn't the federal government dictating to you, a state agency. It's actually, you guys are equal. It's like you're both generals and you're fighting the same war. And the federal act, the 1971 act, is the law. The federal government is not following their own law. I think we can all agree on that. So on this wild horse issue, I think there's some stuff that needs to be changed, is like the word will needs to be should, but everything else is reflective of the act. So if you have any questions on it, I'd love to field those. This is kind of like the Arizona immigration law. You know, it's controversial, yet it isn't, because it just reflects what the act says to do.
Let's see if there's, since we're into 10 now, policy, let's see if there's any, since this is our first reading, want to see if the board's had anything on it in public, and then we'll can bring back commission, we'll grill Mr. Stremler. What do we have?
Tina Happy.
Tina,
She's outside talking to Paul and
next,
She missed it.
Don Mulder.
Paul Dixon.
next.
He's outside talking to
Too late. That's all I had.
Any public comment? Seeing none, close public hearing on, you, okay, Candido, sorry. Didn't see you stand, raising your hand.
Yeah, the Elko Cab, Candido Mendy of Elko Cab. We voted to support action item 2, the horse policy. In the motion, it also included a request of this commission to file legal action against BLM where wild horse gatherers have been canceled or have potential to be canceled. The only comment that was made during the public is there was some concern about one section of it having to do with notifying NDOW, and that would trigger an investigation. Would that, in fact, take a lot of time from NDOW if anybody called in, or is that something that happens now? That was just a concern that people had. Thank you.
All right. Any other public comment on the horse policy?
Yeah.
Go right ahead.
Covering some stuff outside here. On the horse policy, I was looking at the problem that the Clark County Cab had with the horse policy right now is that we felt it was just not written well. There are redundancies, we repeat ourselves. We think in concept, we agree 100% with where you want to go with this, but it needs to be rewritten and majorly rewritten to get there. As it stands, we don't support it as written. We suggest it be rewritten and worked through, and if you wanted to work with somebody to do that or other things, but you know, in concept, you don't have anybody that disagrees that we should have a policy and be working around things. But the way this is written right now, we decided to do that, so.
Could you point out some things?
I can do that. I'll do that with you personally if you'd like. I mean, I don't want to spend the time on the record. I only have 3 minutes here for the chairman, so.
All right. Sounds good. And if you get with them and maybe in writing so we can have that for tomorrow for a second reading, would appreciate it. All right. Further public comment? Seeing no further public comment, close public hearing on the matter. Commission had questions on this. Commissioner Pearl.
Yeah, I'd like to ask,
I don't have a copy in front of me, and I didn't bring one. So I don't.
when Mike mentioned about, are you talking about, because you mentioned some shall should be should or whatever, but the first line on here says the Board of Wildlife Commissioners shall establish, I'm sure you'd want that to read shall establish policy.
What's the background?
So that, aside from that, I frankly think it's a pretty well-written document. And I think there's been a lot of discussion back and forth on it, and I know that you have done everything you can to try to get people to come to your meetings.
We put out the invitation, and I was hoping more people would show up because that's exactly what I want. I don't like to be a dictator or anything like that. I like to hear. I learned all kinds of stuff today just listening to the arguing, going back and forth. I enjoy learning.
On one thing, on G, on the last page.
On which
That
one?
That was the question
G?
that Candido had, I think, was when a member notifies NDOW, do you have any idea of how much time might be required of NDOW in fulfilling what's in G?
I'll give you an example. Let's say that I see somebody poach a deer and it's way out by me. Is NDOW gonna come out and investigate? Absolutely they will. I'll see Jason Jackson there immediately. And the same thing should be true on this. And it should be a biologist. It doesn't have to be that they come out immediately out there. It just has to be that, hey, I'm gonna be out in that area, Jeremy from Battle Mountain, who's doing his sheep research in the Fish Creek Mountains. Say, hey, Jeremy, I want to show you some stuff where these horses are definitely not in thriving ecological balance. Can you come out? Let's set up a time. So it doesn't have to be like, hey, I want law enforcement there right now. It's to get it documented and build this case, because I think what's going to happen eventually is we're going to have a lawsuit against the BLM, but we need documentation. So when we go into this lawsuit, we can say, yeah, we've exhausted the administrative remedies. We've written letters to the BLM. We've notified them that this is taking place on these allotments or this area. This is critical sage grouse habitat. The Hendricks, who just got this award, are 300% over AML. They just got this award. They're sage grouse, they're trying to enhance sage grouse stuff. They're working with NDOW. They're working with the university. They're working with the BLM. And they're still 300% over. We just had a meeting with the BLM yesterday in the Stillwater office in Fallon. So, and they admit, yeah, we're 300% over, and we're sorry about that, but our hands are tied. Well, we need to put pressure on them. That's what we need, and we need it documented. So when it goes to a lawsuit, we're going to win. It's not, we hope we win. It's going to be, Judge, look at all this stuff we've documented. Harpers are 500% over AML right now on the Little Humboldt Ranch. 500%, they have no gather schedule. That's sage grouse habitat too.
Looking at this, we done? Okay, thank you. Looking at G, it looked like there's some really good wording on a lot of, just specifically that one, because it leaves it up to NDOW to determine.
And if I could interrupt.
What they do after it's triggered.
Right. And if I could interrupt, like ranchers and the general public are out there more than the biologists. That's how we depend on getting poachers caught, is by the general public being out there, being active, knowing. I've met with the Chuckers Unlimited or whatever of Pershing County, Dan Hill, he runs a county grader. And I said, hey, when you're running that grader and you see all those burros on the Sea Punch Ranch and it's hammered and they're, that's when that's a trigger for you to talk to the biologist in this area and get that documented, and then they send it in and we start building that case file. And and I also said for him, like using Dan as an example, so then you bring that to the county commissioners, get the BLM there, so it's all a public record that yes, we've identified this as a problem. So and then the county would talk to like Ken or somebody and say, hey, we've identified this as a problem. Is there anything you can do to help put some pressure? Write a letter. And it can be a short letter that I could write the letter and say, hey, here's what I've thought, and you could change it, whatever. But I think that's why the county, local or county officials, because the county also under the coordination, like in Pershing County, we've got that coordination status. So if we get the county, NDOW, kind of gang up on them.
I'm trying to find a comment or change, and I have a problem finding one. So, Commissioner Howell.
Mr. Chairman, on the title that I got here, it says federal horses. Did it mean feral horses?
Oh, yeah, there you go. We found it. We found the letter. Federal horses, up by title on the first page.
Okay. The other question I have is for Brian
No, I'm
Stockton?
not sure about
I'm
that.
not sure about that.
Federal horses and burros.
If you're talking
Federal.
about feral horses are only the horses under state control.
Exactly.
Right,
Change
these
it
are
to feral
federal horses.
You're just talking about the Virginia range. over
Right.
there.
Those are feral horses.
So it's feral horses.
Federal.
It is federal.
Oh, it is federal.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are federal horses that are protected by the Wild Horses and Burros Act. or
Right.
whatever
Okay.
that is.
Would we say wild and free roaming horses and burros? Federal horses.
Well, it goes
and burros.
down and it calls it feral horses later on.
I don't,
But there's a, Chairman Raine,
That's under background.
Chairman Raine, one of the problems that you get into is even when they gather the wild horses, they have to get a brand inspection with the state of Nevada. All unbranded animals technically belong to the state of Nevada. And it's up to the brand inspector to disperse them to their proper owner, so to speak. So when they have a horse gather, there will be a brand inspector there. And so they brand inspect them for them. So they are federal horses, they're feral horses, and they're communal. But it's a lot easier to call a rancher up because they have control of them and say, take your cows off, we don't have them feed, as to have, if you think the bear ladies can fill a room, get around the wild horse folks now, I'll tell you what, they'll pack a meeting room in a second.
All right.
I had one other
Still
question.
feral.
Go ahead, Commissioner Howell.
Mr. Stockton, did you review this?
I did review it and not carefully, and I didn't talk to Mr. Stremler. I was going to talk to him after this, and I have the same problem with the shalls and the wills, that they should be changed to shoulds. And
Do you have a particular one or two here that the worst offenders? I didn't see too many.
okay, well, I could go through it. But okay.
I mean, it shall be submitted maybe under H.
Okay,
What's wrong with
paragraph
that?
A, written notification will be sent. That mandatory language needs to be changed to.
Okay, A,
to,
written notification
non-mandatory language.
should be sent.
Okay.
This should be pretty easy for staff to capture, easier than the previous policy, hopefully. So we knock out a couple of
Okay,
them.
C, end thou shall, end thou should, okay, it's policy. D, end thou shall on the second line, gotta change to should. Same thing on E. Okay, on F, same thing, second line, shall, should. Okay, it's gotta be non-mandatory language.
A trigger mechanism?
And then G's got one too, and so does H. The shall in the last line's okay. Policy shall remain in effect. Yeah, these are PDF documents, so you won't be able to change it. You have to do it on the original.
This notification should, well, if you have
Where
professional.
you at?
I was saying G, notification should be, it shall be a trigger. I mean, a trigger doesn't mean,
Okay, but it's, if shall be a trigger means someone has to take action on the pulling of this trigger, right? And you can't mandate NDOT to have to do this because they have other responsibilities and some policy. It's
I'm just trying to think of a trigger as opposed to the only trigger as
Mr.
opposed to a
Stockton.
bunch of them, but one of many.
I,
Alright,
look at H. All that's saying is this policy shall be submitted to the federal agencies. That, if we're gonna adopt a policy, it seems to me like that wording shall
I
should
take it
be
back.
retained.
H is okay.
Okay.
Take it back.
I agree with the other ones that you've recommended.
Yeah, I was going quickly.
I know.
Because that one doesn't require NDOT to do anything.
Right.
And the reason to give it to the federal agency is that if it's not given, the BLM must be notified in writing
Right.
of any consistencies between, and they don't have to look for our policies or your policies. It's our duty, their policies, it's your duty to submit those policies and now say, and there should be a cover letter that says, now we would like to have coordinating status on the wild horse issue. I mean, it can be that simple, and that's the trigger for them to start coming to you and say, okay, what's the problem? And then you start identifying the problems,
All right.
which are many.
We good on this? Go ahead, Commissioner McBeth.
You know, I go back to what I've said before, that I think part of your problem with your committee is it's dominated by livestock industry, and I think that when people see that, that's a turnoff, and they basically don't come. So that's probably part of your problem. But I want to restate, and you admitted that you wrote this policy on your own to bring it to the commission here, and so I have a lot I'd like to say about this issue and this policy. I think you've got a lot of good stuff in here, but I think it's not adequate. Doesn't go far enough, in my opinion. Okay, and I'll be honest, I have not taken a real deep dive into this, but I see a lot more in this Wild Horse and Burro Act that you haven't covered, and there's some stuff in here that is really because I did ask the director, acting director, mayor, with respect to how much involvement has this department had with the BLM consulting on wild horse issues over in history, and there's been little to none, very little. And so when I go through this act, I see extensive non-compliance with this act. Extensive.
I agree.
Let me just go through some of them. I've got them listed here. NDOW really should be reviewing the HMUs to determine if in compliance with the 71 Act. Throughout the Act, it states that horses are limited to their historic range back in 1971. Right out of the Act, BLM, or the Secretary, may designate and maintain specific ranges on public lands where the Secretary, after consultation with the Wildlife Agency of the state wherein any such range is proposed, and with the advisory board established in Section 7 of this Act, deems such action desirable. Has that happened?
What are you talking about? I'm not the director.
That's right. That's why we need to do a lot of work here to see where we are. In other words, there's a lot of stuff in here that I have a lot of questions on that I do not know the answers to, that are germane to us putting together a policy. And one of my biggest questions is I want to know is how much involvement has the Department of Wildlife had in the determination of the HMUs in Nevada?
HMAs and
HMAs.
And almost zero. I've talked, all the biologists that I've talked to in Nevada, like I've been checking these lions in, and I'll say, hey, this is kind of a close thing to my heart here about these wild horses. Have you guys been working with BLM? Oh, no, they have, they're their horses, and we don't have any responsibility. I said, have you read the act? Because it's only 8 pages. That's when they could actually write an act. And they haven't. So I can tell you from my field experience as being a rancher and a lion hunter and dealing with the NDOW in that respect. And a lot of people just haven't read the act. And you've read it now, and you see how simple it is. And that's why I tried to reflect that in the policy.
Well, the policy on HMUs basically says that if we find horses outside of HMUs, that we say something to the HMAs. I don't know where I've gotten this HMU, and it'll probably go about 6 more times before I get it. Okay, I apologize in advance.
Start throwing stuff at you.
So my point is that shouldn't the policy state that NDOW should communicate with the BLM to pursuant to the act and determine if the BLM designation of HMAs is in compliance with the act. I mean, I just think that's the way we go. Now, let me make this additional point. Determine all areas where BLM to consult with state wildlife agency and implement lines of communication and protocol to ensure compliance. We haven't done that. But let me just show you that there are, in Section 3A, is the specific one I just read, designation of HM, and I got U's here, so I'm gonna change that, HMAs.
Somebody took my Wild Horse and Burro Act out of this deal. So I don't suppose anybody's got it laying around. It's marked up with yellow like
Piece of
everything
paper.
else.
It was
Then I
here
can
when
follow
went
along
down
with
that
you.
way.
But anyway,
Look around.
this is what it says. In section 3A, it says that they're to consult with
That was the last one I had it, but I said.
with the State Wildlife Agency, in our case NDOW, on the designation of HMAs. They're to consult with the Wildlife Agency on the management activities of wild horses and burros. And again, in section 3A. They're to consult with the Wildlife Agency on forage allocations. And in section 3B1, they're to consult with the Wildlife Agency on the determination of AML.
Right.
And I am in agreement that we are probably going to end up having to file suit against the BLM, and I don't know if the Forest Service is much of a culprit in this as BLM, but it would seem to me that we need to have a policy that basically indicates to NDOW that they start making the lines of communication pursuant and do it via the Attorney General's office, where we are basically saying, pursuant to federal law, the 1971 Act, we want to implement this statutory provision, and we want you to start communicating. We are the wildlife agency that's mentioned in this act, and we want to start this process that has not occurred for 40 years.
And the advisory boards are the grazing boards.
The N4 is,
Or is the other agency that's.
that's the advisory board that's being mentioned?
And
Okay.
they continually, it's not,
No, it's not.
All right.
Okay.
Keep
So-
focus.
When you look at the act, forage allocations to BLM Forest Service lands take into consideration wildlife. I'm just reading my notes here. Did we obtain a copy of the research study mandated by section 3B3 of the act? Let me look and see what that is. This is what you guys get when you get an attorney on the Wildlife Commission.
don't take that under consideration.
Is that a record?
What did I say?
Somebody or-
3B3. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, and 3. For the purposes of furthering knowledge of wild horse and burro population dynamics and their interrelationship with wildlife, forage, and water resources, the secretary shall contract for a research study. Mike, do you know what research study that is? Do we have a copy of that?
Actually, what they're doing I wish you had been at our last meeting, because I went over this stuff. In their proposed strategy, they have put together a scientific board to do that research. Again, they've done it. They've
Yeah,
continued to have it.
what is it? The natural sciences?
Right. You're
yeah,
on it.
Yeah.
And they are going to consult with them right now. But they're asking questions like, are helicopters too brutal to gather horses? Things like that. They're not asking about the thriving ecological balance that NDOW needs to be involved in.
That's what I love about item F. It just succinctly covers a lot of it.
Yeah. In section 6,
Are we going to go over the federal act?
the secretary is authorized to enter into cooperative agreements with
Yeah.
other landowners and the state and local government agencies, and may issue such regulations as he deems necessary for furtherance and purposes of this act. Do you know of any MOUs or any other agreements with NDOW with respect to wild horses in the state of Nevada?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
Point
go
of
ahead.
order. Are we discussing the federal act, or are we discussing the policy that's set forth in front of us now?
What we're talking about is what the policy does not cover. What I'm saying is I'm going over
Doesn't the policy on the bottom say that shall remain in effect until amended, repealed, or superseded, which means it can be reopened, should be a continuing committee to review it and the like? I think we ought to get back to the policy discussion.
Okay, what I'm saying is that this is way too important of a policy to just throw this out and have something that we just stick to the wall. We really need to go over this. There's a lot of really good stuff. I would love to be involved in this process.
should have attended the meetings.
And I would love to, I'd love to fully vet it out, and I'd like to get more people involved. I'd like to get more than just the livestock industry involved, because I think what you're going to find is that there's a lot of people that are in support of this, very broad-based. I want to point, I don't know if you realize it, but there was a letter. I think there was a letter that went out from the coalition that listed all of the groups that were in support of control of horses, and that was about 2 years ago, wasn't it, Mel? And from Nature Conservancy, Sierra Club, right on down the line, there are a lot of groups, a lot of conservation groups that are on the same page on this issue with wild horses. And for us to have limited, a number of people on this committee, in my opinion, it was a mistake. We could have got a much broader based support for it, and been a much more credible process and document, in my opinion. And so let me just see, just bear with me. Let me see if there's any more that are important.
All right.
I'd like to respond.
Okay, and a little bit of advice is perhaps you could work with Mr. Stremler between now and Saturday on this. We get some language. I mean,
no, I can't.
Okay, then I guess
I have a quick
if you
question,
can't, then you can't. Couldn't go to the meetings. That's okay. Go ahead, Mr. Vogler.
I know one of the things that you're really wanting to get strong is that it's time for this commission and the wildlife board and our cabs and everybody to step up and enforce what's on the books. Now, are you talking about the Wild Horse and Burro Advisory Group, or is the other group along with the wildlife group in this state, or what is this? Because I know that we have asked N4 Grazing Board, and I think N6, I think all the grazing boards, and the Central Committee have asked for status. But you say there's another advisory board?
There's an advisory board for like Carson District
Yes.
but not the grazing
It's
board.
not
The
the grazing
grazing
board?
board is under state law. The advisory board is under federal law. And so it's a coalition of like wild horse advocate,
When do they
wildlife
meet? Where are
advocate.
they at?
They meet, you go talk to, are you in Ely District or Elko or whatever, you can find out the people on there but yeah,
I
they're
thought
totally,
they disbanded that.
no, they're totally different. I investigate it.
On the policy.
On the policy, I'm gonna just shortly say that it's been 40 years and NDOW hasn't had a policy. So throw rocks at me for the fact that nobody came to the meeting, but everybody was invited. I mean, everybody. Horse advocates showed up, but wildlife advocates were no-shows. What am I supposed to do? Do you want me to drive around the state and knock on your door? I mean, what am I supposed to do, Mike? It's, I did what I
All right.
could. So-
And very much appreciated. Okay, Mr. Capurro.
Okay, couple of comments. First of all, can we clarify that on the policy provisions, starting at A, that the change from will to will be in the document that we look at, or will be considered part of the document that we review tomorrow?
Okay.
On it. Also, the same should be said for C, D, E, F, and G. So those, where it says shall, will be changed to should.
Okay.
And that is what the document that we would be working with
All right.
when it's brought up tomorrow.
So, Mr. Chairman, have you been capturing all these changes?
Absolutely.
Okay. You'll need to work with probably Kim, because we're not capturing,
You're not?
no.
Staff is not capable of capturing these things when all of the commission, I mean, anyways, why is that a problem? It's been a problem. Anyways, let's go on. All right. It's a problem I shouldn't even be addressing. Should never have to. All right.
Okay.
Anybody else?
I can go slower if you'd like me to.
I could speak much slower. Yeah. All right. We're almost done with this. Are we done? Okay. Let's move on to item 12 and about 10. No, item 11 and about 10. Excuse me. gotta be kidding me.
Biggest thing about this.
You want to come over here, Scott?